Welcome back to Book and Page, where we are finishing off Beowulf. Yeah, we are end of the story now. Beowulf is dead. He was dead last video, but that's beside the point. We still have a last couple of sections to get through, and a cat who has to be part of this, doesn't she? Come here, Tiggies. Come here. There we go. There we go. Okay, so let's recap how we actually finish off the story before we get into it in a little more detail. So we start off with news actually getting back to Beowulf's people that their king is dead. And this is very sad news for a couple of reasons. What actually happens is it prompts them to remember all of the hardship they've gone through prior to these sort of 50 years of peace they had under Beowulf, where they were at war constantly with the Swedes and were losing kings. And the horror of not knowing who's taking the kingdom, not knowing what's going to happen, things like that. And ultimately, the people are relatively certain that the Swedes are going to come back in and destroy them. Yeah, it's sort of this moment where they have the realization not only have they lost their king, they've sort of lost their best defender as well. After they've thought through this a little bit, they head off to find Beowulf's body, and the plan is, of course, to bury him. And when they arrive there, they see this 50-foot long... 50 foot? Longer than that? It's a real long dragon. Yep, 50 feet. I remembered that correctly. Long dragon, and the horde, and Beowulf, and Wiglaf. And Wiglaf stands before them and says, "Here is the horde. Some of it's out here, but that's because Beowulf bid me to do that. And he has also bid me to tell you to build him a pyre and then build him a barrow on the sea." And the people say, "Right." And ultimately, we get this moment where they do several things very quickly. We suddenly sort of jump into high gear with the idea that this probably takes a whole lot longer, especially, burning a body down to ash. But they push the dragon's body into the sea, they collect the treasure, and they build Beowulf a pyre. And after he is burned to ash, they then build a burrow and put the treasure inside of it with Beowulf's ashes. Told you it was coming. And we finish very quickly after this point, like less than 10 lines after this point, with a quick sort of lament to Beowulf. And then we're done. Yeah. This last section of the poem can be very confusing because ultimately what we get are 4 sections, 2 of which recount wars that we have not perceived in the poem, and then 2 of which actually go to handling Beowulf and his body. And what I love is even the translator with the footnotes here has mentions this weirdness. Specifically, the footnote mentions the fact that there is a difference between sort of the convoluted nature of describing battles between humans versus the very straightforward nature of describing the battles between Beowulf and his non-human companions. And this is fascinating in and of itself because it gives us a sense that humans are very, 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 very complicated. And the narrator here might be doing this on purpose. He might not be. But in getting this recount of the war between the Geatish and the Swedes, we actually get a point where the leader of the Swedes is winning. He seems to be doing some sacrifice of enemies to a pagan god. We get the description of him leaving bodies out for carrion ravens. in gallows trees. And we've already been told previously here, of course, the gallows tree is not a good place to be. Because we know if you're killed as a criminal, your family can't get restitution of any sort, and they can't get revenge. There seems to be also maybe the idea that if you don't die in battle, but technically die of old age, then we put you in a carrion tree because only those who die in battle go to Valhalla. It's this uncomfortable idea that war is precisely what this society is built on. To the point where that's all they can focus on. Even in their mourning of Beowulf, it's this reflection of war as a history of the person and of the people, and how tightly connected these two things are. The death of a single person can, in fact, signal the continuation of this war. Beowulf was respected and feared as a leader and a warrior to the point where the Swedes backed off. But now they're going to come back. And I sort of got sidetracked here because I was talking about the narrator pointing to the fact that battles between humans are really complicated. Because he actually mentions, so we've got this Swede who seems to maybe be sacrificing some people, and then the narrator calls him a good man. Beowulf comes in, and the Swede, recognizing the strength of Beowulf, retreats and doesn't push battle with him because it's ultimately going to destroy his own people rather than his enemies. And he's called a good man here. Again, the translator picks this up. There's a footnote saying, like, despite everything, this guy hasn't earned the narrator's censor. Which is to say, the narrator isn't saying this guy was a fully bad person, he was a monster. No, because we've fought monsters throughout this tale. We fought Grendel and Grendel's mother and the dragon. Those were monsters. Those were creatures eating people. Killing people for no good reason. And we get these convoluted discussions of human battle because human nature is that complicated and human society is that complicated, especially when it's based on the idea of warriorship at its core. When battle and death in battle is the way you get into the happy afterlife, that says you're constantly going to be at war. And if avenging people is a constant, even if these acts are done in war, which we had before, right? Because you take the armor and weapons of somebody you defeated in battle, and then you've got people there going, those used to be your fathers, and suddenly we've got more killing because the honorable thing is to try and reclaim your family's armor, but it's also honorable to take it from a defeated person in battle. You can see then why the discussions of human battle is so convoluted. Because it's being highlighted just how untenable and ultimately destructive it all is. That we've got this constant cycle that no one is ever going to break. And what's kind of horrific is, again, we don't know the full story here, but it's hinted that when the messenger comes in and says, Beowulf's dead, everybody remove your gold, you're not going to need it anyways because the Swedes are going to kill us all. We're told that's probably true. Because what the narrator says is the messenger speaks unbeautiful truths. He speaks the ugly truth, basically. And you have this realization that the poem is about Beowulf, but it's also about all of these people around Beowulf. The people who are not quite heroes. They don't have his strength. They can't fight a dragon. But they're a warrior culture that is seeing death coming. And maybe then that's why they do what they do with the gold. Beowulf, upon looking at the gold, said, "Thank goodness my people will be taken care of." And instead, what happens is it seems to be going that way, because we're told that people picked the gold not by lot, which is to say that everybody got an equal share. There was so much gold, everybody got it. And they put it all in the barrow. And I do mean all in the barrow. In the barrow they placed rings and bright jewels, all the trappings that those reckless men had seized from the hoard before. Let the earth hold the treasure of earls, gold in the ground, where it yet remains just as useless to men as it was before. They literally took it out of the dragon's hoard and put it into Beowulf's. And through our discussion of the possibility of the last survivor then having become the dragon because he's buried with this gold, there's a possibility of Beowulf becoming a dragon. But in a lot of ways, maybe that's what the Geatish imagine they need. Maybe in this realization, sorry, the cat decided to get nervous. She doesn't like when I get super serious face. But maybe in the Geatish realizing that the Swedes are going to come and that they are not going to win that, because they weren't winning before. They were losing kings left, right, and center. It was Beowulf coming in that saved them. Maybe what they need is a dragon. A dragon who serves them, a dragon that protects them. So what we actually see here is sort of the coming together of ultimately two ideas. Which is to say that war and battle doesn't produce anything. Nothing, absolutely nothing, is earned in the battle between Beowulf and the dragon. In fact, the only thing that results from that is the death of both of those people, creatures, beings. The dragon is gone, but so is Beowulf, and the Geatish people are suddenly without hope. So what use do they have of gold? Ultimately, it will just go to the Swedes. They're conquerors. It will be like the armor and weapons stripped off their defeated bodies. So why not put it in the ground? Why not make Beowulf the dragon even in a remembrance? That the Swedes will remember how much they feared and respected Beowulf, and they won't dare to dig into his barrow. And that treasure is useless to them just as much as it is to the Geats. What good is gold if it simply perpetuates the cycle of violence? Better it be useless in its entirety than used to kill more people. Maybe then the dragon is a good thing because the dragon keeps people away. While the dragon slept, Beowulf had a seemingly relatively peaceful 50 years of kingship. It was only the greed of somebody that woke him up. The greed of a man who had already had everything taken from him. And you can see the problem here. That's why battles between humans is so complicated within the poem. Because there's never one easy answer. You can't point to the greed of humanity and say that's what's destroying us. Because the thief in the barrow was a desperate man. You couldn't call him greedy. He just was afraid. And a great warrior is ultimately what brought peace to the community. Beowulf brought peace to two communities. He brought peace to Hrothgar's hall in the killing of Grendel and Grendel's mother. And he brought peace to the Geatish people in defending against the Swedes. And neither of that matters, for we know Hrothgar's hall will fall to civil war, and we are told now that the Geatish people will fall to the Swedes. Gold is meant to be a reward. We're told about all the fantastic gifts Beowulf is given every time he defeats a monster. But humanity can be monstrous, but that's not all it is. And gold can be used both ways. And here, in this moment, the Geatish people reject it. They make Beowulf the dragon both themselves and the Swedes. And they write his story. Or at least tell it. Until it's ultimately written down. And we get it here. And what's interesting is we finish off not with the gold or Beowulf's great kingship, though that's first mentioned. So the men of the Geats lamented the fall of their prince, whose hearth companions. They said that he was all the kings of the world, the mildest of men, the most gentle, the kindest of his folk, most eager for fame. They might have made him the dragon, but they also kept him Beowulf. By telling his story and spreading his fame as a man and a hero, it doesn't matter what happens after this point. Because Beowulf lives on, I want to say untouched, but we've said before, of course, that oral tales change. And even the written down manuscript at places is damaged. But he's still somebody we speak about today. He's still a great hero among many heroes. And while he's not like other heroes who you never see die because they go off to Avalon or sleep under a mountain and will return one day, Beowulf doesn't have to return. Because Beowulf has always been here and will always be here. When you read this book, you look at his barrow and see a man, some monsters, and a lot of people who are afraid and greedy and joyous and not quite sure what they're supposed to do. Hey, look, that's probably most of us. But that's okay, because we've got a hero to lead the way. He might have been most eager for fame, but he was mildest of men and most gentle and the kindest of his folk. And maybe that's the part we should be aiming for. Whew. These endings always kind of make me a little sad. They usually feel a little too much like endings, especially with Beowulf where we do see a death. But that's sort of the nice thing about literature. From my stack of books alone, well, there's no ending. There's just more to read. And since we've now finished up Beowulf, we'll be going at the bottom of the stack so we can start The Winter's Tale by William Shakespeare. Of course, we always gotta do some Shakespeare in this, so the divisions, I'm gonna put them on screen again for each of our different sections, because I'm just trying to divide them up relatively easily and evenly, and it's confusing as all get out. So if you want to read along with us, we're going to go for it. I always recommend the Oxford Shakespeare, because the Oxford Shakespeare here is going to have some really fantastic footnotes for you. But next video, we're going to do a bit of a Shakespeare supplement. The Shakespeare video itself will be linked in that video from season 1. But we're actually going to talk about how the fact that we have these is kind of amazing. So I'm going to get reading, and I hope you do too. See you next time.